Welcome to IlloTalk. I am Cory Kerr, and this is AI2ae, where we take what you know in Adobe Illustrator and teach you how to transfer that information and knowledge into learning how to animate in Adobe After Effects so that you can create things in Illustrator and make them move in After Effects. It's a really good marriage. And today, we're going to make this ball bounce. We're going to do this so that we can learn all of the attributes inside of the transform controls. So you're going to learn anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. In addition to that, I'll show you how to nest animations inside of other animations using pre-comps, and we'll touch a little bit on looping expressions, and then we will link one object to another object's keyframe so that you don't have to have duplicate keyframes using the pick whip in expressions. If some of that didn't make any sense, hang tight and I'll explain it. Okay, so let's start with the transform controls. Okay, we're going to work our way up from the bottom, starting with opacity. Opacity is exactly what you think it is. It will take things and make them transparent or opaque. Transparent or opaque. That's pretty much it. It works in percentages, and on any of these, when you have the stopwatch selected and it turns blue, that means that you're going to be adding keyframes, which will change things over time. If it's unselected, then you can still have those attributes. I can take this down and I can uncheck that, and that keyframe disappears. It just won't change over time. And so if I go like this and I add a keyframe here at 0, and then I come over here and I add a keyframe here at 100, you'll notice that over time the opacity changes. That's how those work. And I've got more on keyframes in a different video. Rotation is exactly what you'd think it is. You're going to rotate the object. You'll notice that it rotates around that point. And the keyframes, you can tell it the number of times it will rotate. So you're going to go 2 times to this many degrees. If you leave this where it is and you say from here is 0 to 4 seconds is 4, then it will spin that many times all the way around. And so we go all the way around in 4 seconds. Scale works on X and Y, and it will scale both and increases or decreases the size. If you unlink it, then you can scale one at a time. And because we have this rotated, let me put this back at 0. Get my rotation back to normal. Okay, there we go. And so you can see that we can stretch it or squish it horizontally, stretch it or squish it vertically, right? That's what scale does. Okay, so we'll put that back at 100 and back at 100. Okay, and then position is going to be the position from the anchor point, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's just using XY coordinates. And you can just move things to the left and right, or to the top and the bottom. Any of these can be affected with the tools as well. If we use the black arrow tool, it affects the position. If we use the rotate tool, it affects the rotation. Now the last thing that I want you to understand, let's go back again to 0, 0, 100, 100, and this is okay. The last thing that I want you to understand is this anchor point. Now the anchor point is where everything originates from. It's where we resize from. In Illustrator, you're going to, when you resize a shape with your black arrow tool, it pulls from the upper left-hand corner or the opposite corner of what you're resizing from. If you hold Alt, it will resize from the center. In After Effects, it doesn't do that. It only resizes from this anchor point, which is different in After Effects than it is in Illustrator. In After Effects, the anchor point doesn't refer to a point on a path of a vector object, but it refers to the origin point of that object, where all of these attributes originate from. So watch what happens if we take Y, which is our pan behind tool, and we move our anchor point up here. And now we can rotate, and instead of rotating from the center, it rotates from that anchor point. Let me change the color of this background so we can see just a little bit better here. And turn that off. So you can see this anchor point, and as I rotate, it rotates from that anchor point. As I scale and resize, it scales and resizes from that anchor point. Okay? And so those are the main things that you need to understand. Opacity changes the transparency. Rotation will rotate the object. Scale will resize the object, either horizontally or vertically or both. Position will change the location of that object. And the anchor point is the origin point by which all things in the transform attributes measures from or originates from. Now let's get started. If you want to set up your file and follow along with me, then you can come in here and have a lines layer that looks like this, a colors layer that looks like this, or any color really, a dark shadow, and a light shadow. And with all of those together, you save that and make sure that they're all on high-level layers. You can have multiple objects inside of those, but each on their own layer. Save that as an AI file and import that, and you're good to go. So let's start out by opening up After Effects, and then opening a new project, then going to File, Import, File. Once you're in File, Import, File, choose the Illustrator file that you're going to open. Change Import As to Composition, Retain Layer Sizes, and click Open. Okay, now once you double click over here, that's going to open up all the high-level layers that you had in your Illustrator file. And we can solo each one of these so you can see the line work. You can see the coloring of the ball. You can see the dark part of the shadow. And you can see the light part of the shadow. So I have just these 4, but I want them to kind of work in specific ways. And so I want the lines of this basketball to spin, but the highlight, midtone, and shadow to stay the same, because my light source is going to stay consistent, but my lines are going to spin. And so since those two are going to work together, I'm going to highlight both of those, right-click, and choose Pre-Compose. Okay? When I do Pre-Comp, I'm going to go ball _ spin. And let's make sure that we're opening that new composition. Okay, once we go in there, you'll notice that we now only have the ball. The shadow is gone. Those other 2 layers are gone. And so I'm just going to zoom in here so we can see what's going on here. Okay, I'm going to right click here and choose Composition Settings. And I'm just going to check to make sure that I have this the way that I want it. And choose this to be white. Click OK. Okay, so now that we have that, we can do this. I'm going to take the lines and I'm going to twirl in here to rotation. And I'm going to click on that, and that will add a keyframe. So these stopwatches here will turn keyframes on or off. I'm going to go about 8 seconds. And let's spin this about 4 times. And so once I hit return there, you'll notice that the ball now spins as I scrub. So I'm just going to get my preview here to kind of go like this. And when I hit play, it'll render out there. Okay. And you look, it's really stair-steppy and fuzzy. And if we come over here, we'll want to choose this sunshine, which will continuously rasterize. And so when we click that, let's re-render here. Okay, that should clean that up. Okay, so oops, wrong button. All right, so now that that is spinning, we have our basketball. Okay, and I'm going to rename this layer. Right click and click rename. And I'm going to rename that layer Ball Bounce. Okay, and so now we have this, and I'm going to just go to 8 seconds here, but I'm really just going to do this for about 1 second. And so I'm going to press the plus sign to zoom in. Plus sign will zoom in, and minus sign will zoom out. Drag this guy over to about 2 seconds. Plus sign to zoom in. Okay, and now we're about here. And I'm going to take ball spin, and you'll notice that it also spins in this composition. And I am going to hit P for position. I'm going to turn my position on. Okay, and at 1 second, I'm going to copy this frame over. Copy, paste, Command C, Command V. And you'll notice that it seems as though nothing has changed. But we actually had 2 different keyframes, one copy of the other. And so in the middle, I want this to go all the way down. So I can click and drag here, like this, and that will change it. Or I can just click and drag here while I hold Shift, and that will change it. But there's one thing that I've noticed that is a problem. So as we go up and down, you'll notice that the anchor point right here is in the middle of the frame, but not where we need it to be in the ball. And so I'm actually going to click on this position one more time. That will delete all of my keyframes. I'm going to go back to the first position there, and I'm going to twirl into all of these. And we're going to move this anchor point with Y, which is the pan behind or anchor point tool. Move that up, and I want to put that right on the bottom of the ball. Now you'll notice that that doesn't actually change anything with the ball. It just changes where we're able to scale. So you'll notice that we now scale from that point. And if we were to rotate, which we're not going to, it rotates around that point. Okay, so I'm going to reset all those to 0 and undo that keyframe. And then I don't actually need keyframes here. So I'm going to take this, put this back at 100. Get rid of that keyframe, that keyframe, that keyframe, because we're not making changes over time. Okay, so now I'm going to go to position. And with my black arrow tool, which is V, I'm going to put this at the top of the screen. And then I'm going to go to 1 second. And now I can copy and paste like I did before. Or if I just want to add another keyframe, I can just click right here on that little diamond, and it'll add a keyframe at that time. Okay, so now we just have it hover there. Now halfway through, I'm going to come down all the way down, 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 until it hits my shadow right in the middle. Okay, and now when we watch this, it goes down, down, down. And notice how it hovers when it gets back up to the top. Okay, and so we want this to repeat, which we'll do in a moment, but I want to get this bounce down correct before we repeat it. And so when it hits, it's actually going to hit and squish a little bit, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to come back up here, and I'm going to turn scale on. Scale's at 100%, and I'm going to come down, and when it hits, I want it to squish. And so I can do this or that, but that just resizes it. I don't want to resize it. I just want it to squish. And so I'm going to go down like this, and let's go down to about 70%, right? Now, if I go down 70%, the law of conservation of mass means that the air inside this ball has to go somewhere. And if it's squishing vertically, it's going to expand horizontally. And so I'm going to expand this about equal to what I did, and then it'll go and it squishes down. But I don't want it to squish until it hits the ground. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take this keyframe where it hits the ground. Let's zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to take the keyframe where it hits the ground, and I'm going to move that over. Let's move that over 3 frames. Okay, so we'll move that over 3 frames. And then I'm going to take this one where it's at 100%. And I'm going to copy and paste that. Now what that does is it keeps it the same the entire time. So as it travels down, it stays the same size. But once it hits the ground, it starts to squish. But then it leaves the ground. I don't want it to leave the ground yet. So I'm going to go 3 more frames. And I'm going to grab this one and copy and paste it. That's the position. So that's going to hold it in place. And so now it hits the ground and squishes, but I want it to unsquish or bounce back as it leaves. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the ground and squish. I'm going to go back to where it's about to leave. It leaves from this point to this point. And I'm going to put it back where it was at 100%. And so now we see it go down, hit, squish, bounce back up. Okay, and I want it to stay that way, so I'm going to grab this and paste it there. Okay, now I have a full bounce that goes like this. Okay, now what I can do is I could come in and I could say, you know what? This would be pretty awesome if I just took this like this and just copied and pasted it over and over again. So I can grab these and I can copy them, and then I can move this over here and we'll go to about 12 and we'll paste it. But I want this middle one to be in there, so I'll move that over like that. Now it's going to bounce twice, and I can move this over like this. And I can go to 12 minus 2 or 3. Almost got there. Put that one right on the 12 second. Okay, and then you'll notice that it's going to bounce 3 times. So let me just hit minus to zoom out on our timeline here. And we'll go 1, 2, 3. But then it still just hovers, right? And so instead of doing that, what I actually would like to do is I want to delete all of these. Get rid of all these keyframes, delete. Okay? And so we just have one full rotation, and that it ends up in the exact same spot where it starts. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add a looping expression into each of these attributes. To add an expression, you hold Alt and you click on your stopwatch there, and then you can come in here and you can type in code. Or we can just grab this and we can go Property and go to Loop Out. And I just want it to loop out. And I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it in the same spot here. I also want these keyframes to loop. So I'm going to Alt-click. I'm going to paste that code into the expression, and then I'm going to click just above it. And now you'll see with that code that it continues to bounce even after there are no keyframes. Okay? And if I extended this out for a while, you'll see that it'll continue to bounce for as long as it goes. And so let's hit that, and it's continuing to go past the keyframes. And what's happening is this loop expression is telling it, hey, after the last keyframe, go back to the first one and play that through over and over and over again. Right? And so there's our bouncing. Okay? So that's great. But now what I want to do is, let's bring this back to just over 2 seconds here, and we'll zoom back in, and we'll come this way. Now what I would like to do is, I'm going to close these down just a little bit. And if I select this and I just hit U, then it only shows me the attributes that have keyframes on them. So I can toggle U back and forth, and anything that's selected will show keyframes. Okay, so for right now, I want this when it is up. And if I want to go back and forth, I can hit J or K, and it'll jump forward or backward to the next visible keyframe. So at the very beginning, when this is up top, I want this shadow to be lighter. And so what I'm going to do is I have 2 layers here. One is dark and one is light. And I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to turn on my opacity. Oh, that's not O, sorry. I go back to J here. Turn on my opacity, which is T for transparency. Okay. And up here, I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to turn it to 0. I want it to be totally transparent. Okay. And then as it travels down and hits the middle here, I want it to become totally opaque, showing the dark layer. Okay. And then when it comes back and hits this end, I want it to go back to totally transparent. Okay. And so now as it bounces, you'll see that the shadow gets darker and lighter, right? So that's great. But then I also want the shadow to change shape, but I want it to change shape with the other shadow, right? And so what I'm going to do is something that's a little bit tricky, but it's bear with me. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to turn off my dark layer. And so now you see that that's still there, but we've just hidden it, okay? And then I'm going to take scale, and I'm going to turn scale on. So I'll turn this on, and then I'm going to go down. And at this point, when it hits, I want it to be quite small. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to shrink it down so that it's quite small. Okay, and then I'm going to come back out, and I want it to be still that same size with no change. And then when it leaves, I want it to go back to its full size. And so now as we come down, it shrinks and then goes back up, right? Okay, now what I would like to do is I'm going to twirl into, let's hide this. I'm going to twirl into the dark shadow again. And here's where we can tell, I can copy and paste these keyframes up here. That's fine. But I can also just tell it, you know what? Everything that this one does in this attribute, do it up here too. And so instead of typing in more keyframes, on my dark layer here, I just want to show, I'm just going to expand this a little bit so you can see what's going on. There we go. Okay, so my dark shadow layer, I'm going to Alt-click on Scale, and instead of typing in code or choosing something from this menu, I'm going to go to the expression pick whip. And what that will do is it will marry or parent it to another variable. And so if I take this expression pick whip and I bring it down to the scale of this other ball, you'll notice that it says inside of this comp, take ball shadow and follow that, right? And so as it goes down now, when I turn on, let's make this visible again. As I turn this on, it's going to go down, and you'll notice that both of them are changing size, even though both of them are changing size, even though I didn't add any size or scale keyframes to one of them. I just parented it to the other one, okay? And so then what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to come in here, and I notice that right here, it gets wider, right? And so I'm going to go back to scale. I'm going to unlink these, and I want it to spread out. I want it to spread out horizontally so it fills the available space there and acts more like a realistic shadow, right? And so we are going to see that it's going to come down, get darker, expand with the bounce, contract, and then get bigger and lighter as it leaves, okay? And then we're just going to do the same thing. Anywhere where we have keyframes, we're going to Alt-click, choose this little arrow and go to Property Loop Out. Click up here. And then down here, we're going to Alt-click. We're going to choose this little layer and go to Property Loop Out. Okay, and now it should just bounce. And the shadow changes, okay? And let's zoom out by pressing minus. Drag this all the way over. Let's let this render out. And now you'll see that it continues to spin, bounce, and the shadow gets darker and expands and contracts based on whatever, even though all of our keyframes are up here at the beginning, okay? And so let me show you exactly what's going on, okay? Inside of ball spin, we have our spinning ball, okay? And that spins. And I'm actually going to add this rotation to this as well, so I'm going to Alt-click, and I'm going to go Property Loop Out. And so that will just spin indefinitely. So that spins but doesn't bounce and has no shadow. Then we put that one inside of this one. And so you'll notice that ball spin, which we just looked at, is inside. It's a pre-comp that's nested inside of ball bounce. Okay, and it bounces. And that's great. Okay, and I just want to check keyframes here. I'm going to change this to 30. And I'm going to change this to white. Just so all of my keyframes, or all of my compositions match up. We'll go okay. Okay, and then I'm going to create a new composition. So I'm going to go to Composition, New Composition. You can also press Command-N. And I'm going to call this one Ball Scene. Okay, and I'm going to go to 30 frames per second, and everything else is great. Now that we have Ball Scene, I'm going to take Ball Bounce, which includes Ball Spin. Take Ball Bounce and drag it down here, okay? And on Ball Scene, which is what we're in right now, I'm going to right-click, and I actually am going to go in Composition Settings, and instead of being this weirdness, I'm going to change this to 1920 by 1080, which is just a basic aspect ratio. Then I'm going to click OK. And then down here, I'm going to change this to fit. Okay, we might have to zoom out a little bit. Okay, so now what's going on, let's zoom out, Command-N to zoom out, is our composition is larger or taller than the thing that it's put in. And so we can just take our black arrow tool, which is V, hold Shift, and just constrain the proportions that way. Okay, so let's open up everything and make sure that I didn't choose position yet, so we'll twirl into all of it. I'm going to get rid of my scale. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is you'll see that it still spins and it still bounces. All of those things are still happening. But now I'm going to take this one and I'm going to have it move laterally. Okay, and so I'm going to start it off screen like this. Okay, and then I'm going to take 8 seconds. Let's go to 8. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so I can actually hit 8 here. There we go. And I'm going to go in 8 seconds. I'm going to go all the way across. I'm holding Shift so that it only does one direction there. And you'll notice that I go all the way across. Let me zoom out just a little bit more. And what happens is one composition is spinning the ball. One composition is bouncing the ball. And the third composition is moving the ball left to right. And so we can come in here and go all the way to the beginning and play this through, and it bounces just like that. Okay, now I'm noticing that at the top it looks a little awkward because it's actually going to go up and it's going to slow down. Before we fix that, let's make this loop forever. And so we'll Alt-click and we'll go up here and we'll go to Property, Loop Out. Okay, and we click away, and then it'll just continue to cycle through that after the last keyframe, so it does it again. Okay, but I want to drill back into that bounce and make it a little bit more realistic. So double click. Okay, and I'm going to take Ball Spin, which is the ball. We're making it bounce. And at the peak of this bounce, right here, on the position, I'm going to take this and right-click, and I'm going to go to Keyframe Assistant and turn Easy Ease on. And what that does is that's going to make it kind of smoother. And so now as we watch this bounce, you'll see it hover slightly at the top. Notice how it slows slightly at the top? A little slower than it did before. What if I want it to go even slower? I can grab this whole section of keyframes, hold Alt, and let's click this out to 2 seconds. If I'm holding Alt, it moves every keyframe that's selected and keeps the proportions the same. And so we'll go like this. You notice that that's a little slow and our shadow's freaking out. I just wanted to show you that functionality. So I'm going to move this back to 1 second. Okay, and now we should line up again. So let's just make sure I'm going to go through J and K. Okay, so the shadow's good there, shadow's good there, shadow's good there, and shadow's good there. Great. And so as I play, it should slow down. It's going to render this out at the top. Okay, now let's go back to Ball Scene. And let's see how this looks. So I'm going to take this and click Fit and go over here like this, and we'll just watch it bounce across the scene. Okay, let's let it render. There we go. So there you have making a ball bounce, squish, and spin with a shadow that bounces, squishes, and with it, right? And so just to review, I'll show you one more time. The ball spin, we took the lines and we rotated the lines so that the lines rotate, but the colors do not. So our highlights, our midtones, and our shadows stay the same, and that rotates there. Then we took that and we made it bounce. So we took that pre-comp of it spinning and we moved it up and down and up and down and squished it so that it moves up and down. And then within our shadows, we took those and on one of them we changed the opacity and the other one we changed the scale. And then we married the opacity with a pick whip to the scale. Or sorry, we married the dark shadow to the light shadow on the scale with a pick whip. And so that bounces and stretches, right? Okay. And that seems to go a little far, actually. I'm gonna zoom in on this and just tweak it just one more time. So we'll go right. Oh, we're off. That's what's going on. Okay, so when I stretch it back out, I didn't quite hit 1 second. So I'm gonna hold Alt again. 1 second. That's what was bugging me. Okay, so now we're back. Okay, and then we'll go to ball scene, and in ball scene, we moved the ball all the way from off-screen left to off-screen right, and the bouncing is happening in one composition, and the rotation is happening in the other composition, and the lateral movement is happening in the third composition. And you can actually see all of that right here. Ball spin is inside of ball bounce is inside of ball scene. All right, so there's a bouncing ball. You've now animated a bouncing ball looping animation of a spinning ball nested inside of a bouncing ball nested inside of that bouncing ball and spinning ball moving from the left to right. So that's nested animations that are called pre-comps. We've learned how to smooth out those keyframes by using easy ease, and we've learned all of the things that we need to know inside of the transform panel, including opacity, rotation, scale, position, and what the anchor point is. If you found this helpful, feel free to share it and like and subscribe. And we are putting all of, I say we, it's me, I'm putting all of these videos inside of my AI2ae playlist. And if you'd like to see how I learned all this stuff, check out my 100 Days of Animation playlist, Season 1. And if this type of thing is interesting to you, check out the other stuff that I'm doing at corykerr.com. We'll catch you guys later. I'm out.